message is entitled The Shining Star. Beginning verses 1 and 2, and then reading verses 9, 10, and 11. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." And then verse 9, after they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. And on coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of myrrh. Somehow or another, I've come into possession of a book published in 1987 by a man named Grady Dearman, who lived on Oval Lane in Laurel, Mississippi. He is an amateur astronomer. His book is entitled Astronomy, not astrology, but Astronomy and Chronology in the Life of Christ. And he begins with the Star of Bethlehem and what it might have been, and using the charts and the maps of astronomy, he traces back to celestial events that may have been the very thing which pointed to Jesus. He contends that Jesus was born between 2 and 3 BC. Now, most historians and Bible scholars would say Jesus was probably born before AD 0, and he agrees with that. He said the Star of Bethlehem could very well have been a conjunction of the planets of Venus and Jupiter. Venus, which is the planet that denotes a queen. Jupiter denotes a king. In 3 BC, those two planets, viewed from the Middle East, especially the eastern part, Iran, Iraq, Babylon, those two planets shining in the sky would have appeared as stars to these men, and they came into conjunction, and they held their position for a number of days together, so that the difference between them was 0.008 degrees in the sky. They looked like one. They didn't have telescopes back then. They thought that the planets shining were, in fact, stars. Now, just the fact that the king and the queen come together do not necessarily point to a king born in Israel. But they came together, and the backdrop in the sky was the constellation Leo, the lion, the symbol of the tribe of Judah. And the brightest star in the constellation of Leo is called Regalis. Regalis is the star called the lawgiver. And the two stars, Venus and Jupiter, the two planets, when they came together, they started south to the bottom of Regulus, and then they passed across the lawgiver and into between the feet of the lion. Born in the house of Judah, a lawgiver, the king, and after a few days, those two stars parted again, which is why when they got to Bethlehem, the star was not shining, but they knew that it had happened, and they traveled perhaps several months to get there. In fact, just 2 months after they saw this star come together, this bright star in the night sky, all of planets lined up with the sun in the daytime, and they all disappeared from the night sky. Another sign in the heavens, Mr. Dearman claims. And you have to understand, he views the sky as an astronomer would from the time that the stars were there. Listen to his poetic description of the starlight shining. He says, "Burning bright, these two stars became one, and they hung above the rim of the western horizon." Now remember, they're east, and across the western horizon from Babylon is Judea, is Israel. And the royal pair sank from sight, and at the same time a full moon was rising in the east. So they're looking to the west, and the star there is setting, and the full moon is rising behind them. By the way, interesting, I saw on the scroll that the full moon will be on Christmas Day, the first time we've had a full moon on Christmas since 1977. Oh my goodness. I thought it happened more often than that. Apparently not. It must have been a thought-provoking backdrop to the bright burning star, the moon, rising in its place. Now this celestial event would have been visible from Palestine, but it would not have had the same effect because it would have looked differently in the night sky. Only viewed from the east would it have been visible like that. Travel to Bethlehem would have taken at least 3 months, time enough after Jesus had been born for the purification rites to have taken place. Now Jesus was probably circumcised on the 8th day because that was the law. But then there were another 33 days of purification for Mary. Anyone who touched blood, and Joseph would have been there at the delivery, anyone who touched blood had to be purified for a number of days before they could present themselves in the temple. And Luke tells the story of the presentation in the temple. It would have been at least a couple of months before they got there. The Magi stopped in the capital city in Jerusalem, and somewhere, a few months later, from Palestine, from Jerusalem, looking south toward Bethlehem, the stars converged one more time, and the light shone. It's a celestial event that does not happen very often, and in fact, we always call attention to it when it does. When everything lines up, there's something important going on. Herod and the experts told the wise men, the Magi, Bethlehem is the place where the king is to be born. And when they got out that night away from Herod, they saw again convergence. But this time it was moving through Virgo, the Virgin, the star born to the young woman. It is also possible, now that's his contention, Mr. Dearman. It is also possible that what the Magi saw was not some convergence of planets or stars conforming in a singularity in the heavens, but maybe it was something like Halley's Comet. Halley's Comet had come in 12 BC, 10 years before the planets aligned in this way. It couldn't have been Halley's Comet. It was too far removed. But maybe something like that possible in the heavens. You know, God can make whatever He wants, whenever He wants it. And if it were some special star that shone only for a short time, remember 2 weeks ago we talked about the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second. God would have had to launch that light well in advance so that it traveled exactly to the earth at the right moment and then cut off at exactly the right moment as well. It is additionally entirely possible that what the Magi saw was something unique, something special, something that God put in the heavens at just the right moment. Perhaps it was a star that came and went, did its work, and then vanished. All of the signs were present. Everyone could have seen it, but only the Magi were paying attention. One might have thought that Zechariah's very public experience in the temple just a year earlier, and his aging wife's subsequent pregnancy would have alerted at least some of the people to the fact that there was something happening. God was moving. God was working. They were all busy going about the affairs of daily life. And yes, they celebrated with Elizabeth and Zechariah at the birth of John. But it had been 3 months since John was born. You know, after 3 months, you go on with life. There's crops to plant or harvest. There are business things to conduct. There are other things happening in life. After all, you know, it's only once every 1,200 years or so that an old woman gives birth. It may not have happened since Abraham and Sarah gave birth to Isaac. One might think that the Pharisees and the teachers of the law would have had the time to look heavenward. You know, they attracted students to them, and a lot of times they were paid by those students. They could be leisurely engaged in scholarly pursuits. Maybe they had the opportunity to look to the sky, to pay attention to the signs. Yet they had their noses buried instead in the minutiae of the law. They were trying so hard to be righteous themselves, and they were looking so hard at the others around them to see who might have violated the minutiae that they just found. And they wanted to point out someone else's flaws. They were so busy wondering what others might think of them, worried about their reputation, and perhaps trying to ruin the reputation of others. They were not paying attention to the right thing, at least. Some of those were distracted from the important things in the sky, in life, in the ages that were coming. I wanted to play a video for you today, and I couldn't get it to work on our systems. That United Healthcare has a cute video talking about entering the healthcare system, and it's a man who is concentrating and focused so diligently on one thing that he misses a lot of other important things around him. He's walking down the street looking at his phone. You all have seen them. Looking at his phone, staring at it, smiling and laughing and clicking this and that, and he's nearly run over by a taxi cab in the street. You hear the cab driver yell out, "Watch where you're going!" He walks on, and down the street he goes, and he bumps into a lady weighed down with bags of groceries. And he ignores that he even ran into her. And she looks back at him with a sneer on her face, wondering how he could be so distracted from her, the important thing. And then he walks up to a light post on the sidewalk, and his foot touches it, and it stops him 2 inches short of banging his face into the light post. He looks up and he realizes the light post is there, and then he walks around the light post looking at it with disgust, wondering how that light post got in his way. And you hear the jackhammers in the background and the construction workers all around him, and all he sees is the light post. He walks on down the street and he falls into a manhole. Commercial says, "We don't care how you get into and we know you're going to get there. You know, we might be tempted to think that it was the flaw of the ancient religious societies that focused on the wrong things. But quite frequently, we ourselves, when we're paying attention to really good, really important, really useful things, we may be missing out on other things as well. The other night, Michelle and Danielle and I were all sitting at the table having a bite to eat, and each of us was looking at our phone and missing the conversation. And Michelle said, "We must be a true American family." But it's easy, for instance, for the church to become institutionalized. And it begins to spend so much time and energy and money maintaining the organization that it neglects the real mission of spreading the good news, making disciples. We become focused on taking care of each other, and we neglect the poor and the hurting, the widows and the orphans who surround us. Yes, there is ministry that takes place inside the church building. But it should not take place at the expense of those who are outside. In fact, our ministry inside is supposed to prepare us to go and do, to be ministers. Just prior to the French Revolution, or perhaps when it was just getting into full swing, Queen Marie Antoinette flamed the fires of the Revolution with one simple comment. She was busy taking care of the elite, maintaining appearances. But her life was so far removed from the average Parisian that she could not understand what was happening. Someone told her that the peasants did not have any bread. Her response was not intended to slander them or make light of their plight, rather just a comment. It was normal in her sphere. She put forth an alternative. Well, if they don't have any bread, let them eat cake. Someone heard her comment, and it cost her her head. We need to be able to read the signs of the times. It was the Magi who saw the star and responded with a well-organized trip, and they brought gifts worthy of a king. There were others who were attuned to the Spirit of God and knew that the times were being fulfilled in their presence. On the day when Jesus was taken to the temple for the ceremony and the rites to offer the sacrifices outlined in the law, Simeon was there. Simeon had been told by the Spirit of God, he had this intuition from God that he was not going to depart from this world until he had seen the Messiah come. And he hung out close to the temple because he knew that it was the law, that the babies born would all be brought for dedication to God. And so he stayed around. Surely he must have wandered up to several families over the course of months or the years that he waited. And he looked at them, and the Spirit said, "This is not the one." But when Mary and Joseph brought their baby boy into the temple, he went over and recognized the signs were there for him. The Spirit spoke. He said, "Let your servant now depart in peace, for I have seen your salvation, a light for the Gentiles and glory for your people, Israel." But just 33 years later, the disciples asked Jesus what would be the signs of the end of the age. Jesus responded, "You know that when the fig tree begins to look green and the leaves start to sprout, that summer is near. So learn the lesson of the fig tree, and when you see the signs of the times, know that the age is nearly at an end. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places, and these are the beginnings of the birth pains." In fact, those who were watching and waiting knew that it was about to happen, and they fled Jerusalem as the armies of Rome advanced on it just 37 years later, 70 A.D. They fled to the hills. They fled to the rest of the empire. But why didn't the others who were there leave before the destruction of Jerusalem and the city, before the rampart was built against the walls, before all of those who were in the city had lost all hope and all of their food was gone? Why did they stay behind? They simply did not know the signs, or they were so busy going about the activities of daily life, they didn't recognize that the signs were happening. They didn't see that the fig tree was budding. We need to pay attention. Here's an important aspect of this story that we miss to our eternal detriment. You see, Jesus is coming back one more time. And though we need to be about the affairs of daily life, not just sitting around idly waiting for Him to come, we also need to keep our eyes on the signs. We need to be prepared for His coming. In Luke chapter 17, again, Jesus was talking to the disciples about the signs of the times. He said, "Just as in the days of Noah, so it will be in the days of the Son of Man. For people were eating and drinking, marrying and being given in marriage, up to the day that Noah entered the ark. And then the flood came and destroyed them all." Listen, we can ill afford to miss the signs that He's coming back. We cannot be unprepared for His coming. When He was born, the Scriptures pointed to the time. When He was born, He was announced to Mary and Joseph, to Elizabeth when Mary went to visit her and to stay with her, to Simeon, to Anna, to a lowly group of shepherds on the Bethlehem hills. And even those who were looking, the Magi, saw the signs in the sky. And even those who heard their testimony were not curious enough to go and see for themselves. Yes, Herod was curious enough, was worried enough, was conscious enough to send and have all of the children born in the region of Bethlehem killed. But he never went to recognize Him. He never went to see the revelation. He never went to worship Him. None of them did. And yet He's coming again. Except when He comes again, Scripture says, it won't be just to a few. It won't be just to a selected audience. It says when He comes again, every eye will see Him. But the real question is, have you seen the signs before He comes? And have you made yourself right with Him so that when He comes, instead of bringing judgment, He brings a reward? When Jesus comes, He will roll back the scroll of the stars in the sky, and He will be the brightest shining light in the sky that we have ever seen. Many people who have been busy about the affairs of life will find that they have not been prepared for His coming. And much to their chagrin, when He arrives, it will be too late. Have you taken care of the details? Have you confessed your sin and sought His forgiveness? Have you already received Him into your life? And are you making preparations now for the last day? Are you paying attention to the signs? Are you listening to the Spirit? Please don't wait until you see Him coming on the clouds of glory. Trust Him now. Accept Him now. Be prepared for eternity now. Be saved this day. And then watch for the signs of His coming.